So it's been a long journey, and it kind of started when all the cows went mad. Do you remember that back in the
Yeah.
day?
When
Everyone's
was that?
forgotten
Like
about mad cow disease. I think it was around
early 90s?
93.
Yeah.
Yeah, early 90s. And at that point, my mum went, right, we're not eating red meat anymore. And I was young, so I didn't really understand what was going on, but
Mm.
I just knew that we weren't eating cows and lambs anymore. And I was like, cool. So that started it. And then over the years, we went reducing it down. We became pescatarian, then we became vegetarian. And then I was a guilt-ridden guilt-ridden vegetarian for like about 15 years, where I was loved animals. I've grown up with animals. I had, when I was younger, I had everything from donkeys to chickens to pheasants to horses to everything. So we were always surrounded by animals and would rescue anything and everything and take anything under our wing and as kids. And so knowing how much I loved animals, then stopping eating meat, I still had this disconnect because I was like, I I didn't fully understand the damage of dairy and didn't
Mm.
fully understand that it's, worse almost than growing animals for meat. The process is so much longer, the emotional, the physical stresses is increased over this time of a dairy cow's life. And so battled with this kind of like, but I love cheese, but it's not as bad, it doesn't have a face, all of that. And then 5 years ago, I went, right, that's it. I think I'd watched Cowspiracy, I'd watched Earthlings, I'd started to read around, and it was at a time when there was loads more information coming out. And once you I had a day when I was like, I need to sit down and watch all these documentaries. I need to cry. I need to burn these images into my retina.
Mm.
And then at that point, I was like, I can't do it. And from that day, and it's always a journey with going plant-based and then going vegan, which I see them as two different things, to getting to the point of where I am now. At the start it was, right, you're not eating meat and dairy and eggs, and then it goes into, that cheese that you'd love so much, suddenly it just doesn't taste nice in your mouth anymore. I would
Mm.
love the gooey, saltiest cheese, and it was just like, as a vegetarian, I had cheese on everything. And then suddenly, because I knew of the emotional suffering and because I knew of what was happening in the process of making that product, it just didn't taste good for me anymore.
Mm.
And within like the 40 days of the addiction cycle that we have, I stopped craving cheese, I stopped wanting cheese. And now, walking past a deli or somewhere where there's lots of cheeses, it's too much for me, and the smell is awful, and I just can't. But back in the day, I would have been like, oh, it smells amazing. So it's really funny, the kind of emotional, mental kind of process you go to. And the same with removing other products from my life, like leather. That leather jacket that you had that you always thought you looked
Mm.
really hot in. You'd put it on, and I'm like, I can just see the skin of another animal on me now. It's gross. Doesn't matter how much I loved it. So threw away hundreds of pounds worth of boots and jackets and stuff. But yeah, it's been a real journey up to now, but it feels great.
Was that early 90s sort of family decision? Was that purely about the health and the fear of, the what the animal agriculture industry was kind of brewing up in terms of, these diseases and so on?
I think so. That from my mum's dishes, and as I said, I was
Mm.
only a kid,
Yeah,
so
of
it wasn't
course.
something I was really thinking about. But very much from my mum, it was all over the news, the zoological diseases that were happening, and the concern. And then at the same time, you had egg scandals, and people were starting to understand that there
Mm.
was more antibiotics used in animals. So at the beginning, it was very much a health thing. Even though my mum, who now is 99% vegan, she was a massive animal lover as well. It was just the two of us, and I think we both lived with this cognitive dissonance
Mm.
where we loved animals more than anything. They were part of our family, but somehow we were still ingrained in this culture of being thinking that, they live this nice, happy existence, and that actually somehow we're supposed to eat them, and this is how it's supposed to be. So it's definitely been a journey. For me now, I'm an ethical vegan for sure. The health implications are the cherry on the top of a great
Mm.
lifestyle choice. But for me, it's the emotional and the ethical experience of being a vegan that's really crucial for me.
Yeah, absolutely. The last sort of, is it 5 years? You said, and you went through this period of, I'm gonna. I think you used the phrase, and I liked it. But burn the images into my retina. From watching the various documentaries that were out there. Was there a sense of, I need to relearn a fair amount, whether it be dietary or, was it like what about all of the products in my life? Did you go through quite a big learning journey? And if so, where did that learning come from? Did you have folks guiding you through this at that point?
Yeah, I think when I made the decision to go fully vegan, I was very healthy in my lifestyle anyway. I'd set up and owned a juice bar and was doing juice detoxes and was very much on the health trip and was understanding all the different, herbs and plants and foods that we can get into our diets to make us healthy, even though still with little slithers of, fish here now and then and some, cheese and eggs here now and then. So at that point, I was at a point in my life where I was ready to then take that further bit of research and go into, making sure I have complete proteins, making sure that I'm getting a complete, a complete diet and that I'm not lacking anything. And I find that really interesting because nobody ever looks at someone who eats meat and, when they're not looking great or they're tired, goes,
don't worry about
do you think you're getting enough vitamins? Do you think you're getting enough minerals? Nobody thinks that. And yet, a lot of people are deficient in vitamins and minerals that they should be getting because, they're eating poor quality meat. They're eating, meat in itself isn't enough to give you everything that you need. But we've been tricked into this amazing marketing ploy, which has been finally interwoven into our culture over thousands of years, that actually, we need meat to survive. We need dairy for strong bones. And like the myth that we need, alcohol to have a celebration, these are marketing myths. And this is what slowly people are starting to realize and go, oh, there was a product that needed to be sold. And they created the culture around that. And now, because of these amazing documentaries, because of the way that information is shared online and the resources open to us now, that's really changing. I think when I went vegetarian, if there'd been the internet or, the internet like it is now, if there'd been the amount of the data and information that there is now, I probably would have gone vegan a lot sooner. I think it was just, the last 5 years has been amazing, hasn't it? For documentaries, for research, for studies, Veganuary, the work that PET is doing, like all the work that's kind of coming together to push this plant forward message and this vegan future for sustainability, for animal welfare, for our health. It seems like it's kind of bubbled up now to a point where the messages are too strong for people to ignore.
On that front of the social media point, and it's been a bit of a discussion point in a few podcasts over the weeks and months. I think we'd probably both agree that there's definitely this sharing of information. Like you say, if we'd have had access to some of this information long ago, we probably wouldn't have believed the myths and legends and marketing ploys that we were given from sort of birth almost. But it has a kind of, there's a potential, and I hear a lot of debate within the sort of quote unquote vegan community. There's a potential negativity around the sort of influencer culture that sort of veganism's kind of co-opted by commercial sort of forces, if you like. There's all these kind of, there's a lot of negative spins on it. I'd just love to get your take on it, on where you think kind of quote unquote vegan culture and vegan community is, and the role of social media within it.
It's really interesting, and I think it is something that you're hearing people within the vegan community talking more about, and I think it's a double-edged sword, right? So social media has driven and created a platform where you can share information, people can see videos, they can find out health information. And for the most part, that's been amazing. That's been transformative. That's really helped push veganism into the mainstream. However, on that vehicle on that train driving veganism into the mainstream, there's been some passengers that are not necessarily doing it for the right reasons. But if they're getting that train to its destination, I'm willing to go, I don't really care. But there are a lot of these flaky, fair weather vegans or people that are, hashtagging veganism, hashtagging vegan, putting pictures of them, eating smashed avocado, and like yesterday they weren't vegan and the day after they won't be vegan. That to me I find very frustrating, and I find that it can be then perpetuating this kind of feeling with non-vegans that it's a fad, that it's flaky,
Yeah.
you know, that there's not much substance in it. You also have, you know, tales then of influencers encouraging young people to go vegan without any kind of context around it, and then they're becoming not very well because they're only eating bowls of kale, and then, you know, they're not looking after their nutrition, and, you know, then it just looks like it's this kind of unhealthy celeb influencer culture that's, you know, making everyone vegan and not very well. However, I feel like in order to mainstream a movement, this in the modern world that we live in is an unavoidable byproduct.
Yeah.
These influencers and social media, whether it's veganism or eco or Black Lives Matter. How many people did you see posting black squares and Black Lives Matter who, you know, don't care about Black Lives Matter, but they're doing it for the gram? You know, people that are going on about how, you know, conscious they are of the environment, and yet every other picture is them on a beach somewhere and they're flying around the world. And so it's like, you're always going to have those people. But I think we have to go, fine, you can sit on the back of my train whilst I'm driving into the mainstream and just shush and be quiet, because there's lots more people who are driving it forward in a more positive message.
That's a really good point, actually, about that. That it's almost you didn't say this, but I'll say it. It's sort of a necessary evil.
Yes, a byproduct. We can't avoid it.
Yeah. That it's, you know, and it's almost the vehicle of gaining sort of attention and traction. But I think there's an interesting point about who's kind of driving the train. That there's a responsibility incumbent upon, you know, the sort of the rest of the vegan community, if you like, to help people, whether it be from a health standpoint, whether it be from understanding the ethical arguments and debates that exist within, doing it for the right reasons, you know, so on and so forth. Because I think, you know, most people I speak to on this podcast will say that they, even if they started for health, it's almost by this point it's a byproduct. The ethics have kept them. You know, they might have started for health but stayed for the animals. And so you know, I think it is. I think you're right insofar as it's a necessary evil. But do you think, therefore, almost rather than fight it and debate it within the rest of the community, we, you know, probably need to be more in a space of embrace and then help teach and learn once people are in the community? Or do you think we were right to call it out?
No, I mean, I think it's definitely interesting to discuss and to discuss it internally. I think someone who's not vegan and doesn't want anything to do with veganism probably doesn't listen to this podcast, or listen to a couple of vegans chatting.
They probably wouldn't.
So,
I hope they would, but they probably wouldn't.
Yeah, but I think in the outside world, I think, you know, who's driving the train, you ask? Well, it's the activists. It's the people that have been tirelessly championing for animal welfare since, you know, the 70s, 60s, before, you know, they were the early vegans. They had to have sad brown rice and, like, you know, under-seasoned tofu for years. They had to be kind of excluded as the weird hippies in society. They had to be the people that, you know, got a bowl of salad at every dinner party, or just weren't invited to the dinner party because they were the difficult ones. Those are the guys that were championing them. Unfortunately, activism and dedication isn't sexy in the mainstream, and that's wrong, but that's just the way it is. You know, nobody, and most people don't want to go on a pig save mission. No, most people don't want to sit outside a slaughterhouse and hear the noises that are coming outside. Most people don't literally want that blood on their hands, because that's just not how society works. It always takes the mavericks and the protagonists within society to push for that. And unfortunately, you know, they have to do the fight. They have to be the ones that struggle and literally cry every night because nobody seems to be listening to what they're saying. Nobody seems to be making the change. And I think what we need to step back as a community of people who are trying to literally change the way the world is going and change systems is to go, okay, if we're going to bring it into the mainstream, who cares if some fluffy influencer is going on about who they're vegan? Who cares if there's celebrity endorsement? Because we all have to drive this forward. You know, it's down to producers who are making plant-based products. It's down to people going, okay, cell-based meat, it's a bit minging. I don't necessarily want to eat it, but it's better than eating a cow. You know, burgers and products that emulate flesh. A lot of hardcore vegans don't like that. Who cares? It's saving an animal's life if someone's eating it. So I think if veganism is going to really kind of achieve the goals that we want. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we're being pushed into a situation where there is no other choice. There aren't the resources to live in a world where animal infrastructure is our main protein source. We're not in a position where we can afford that amount of carbon, to be expelled through animal industry and farming. We're not at a point where our bodies can take any more antibiotics because we're resistant to most of them already. We're being forced ecologically and socially into a more plant-based future. But I think it's down to us all to go, just take what we can to make one more person not have meat on their plate for 1 serving a day, 2 serving a day, 1 month a year, or every single day. And I think, we've, as a community, the extremism side of it, even though it is vital and necessary, and people do need to go on those marches, they do need to go to those slaughterhouses, they do need to literally be active in making a change, that's not going to bring in people that don't know about it. That's going to alienate people. It's going to scare people. An activist, not everyone is an activist, and all they should be. They're the warriors of society that push forward and make sacrifices for the greater good of us, and they should be commended for that. But I think if we can just open up the doors in education, in products that are available, in knowledge, documentaries, in endorsements, then that's really what's going to make it mainstream. And that's what's been happening. That's why Tesco's now has the largest range of plant-based foods out of all the supermarkets. That's why plant-based meat, cell-based meat is getting some of the biggest investment funds in the world. That's why Oatly is kind of pushing forward as one of the leading brands. And that's why companies like Tyson and these huge meat producers, and this is an interesting point, which I'd like to get your opinion on as well. They're now investing in cell-based and plant-based meats. Now, one person could go, yes, but they've got farms with tens of thousands, millions of pigs, but now they're also investing in plant-based meat. You could say, I don't want that dirty money, blood money, coming into a vegan product. But equally, every single dollar in this world has blood on it somewhere in the chain. Because that's capitalist world that we live in and the unfair world that we live in. So why shouldn't we take some of their money to save some more pigs, even if they're still producing the farms at the same time? I mean, what do you think about that?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, generally speaking, I suppose I do have a real skepticism for companies introducing vegan products that are not vegan businesses. And I mean, Nestle's Kit Kat, for example, I've got no interest in partaking in that product. And I feel very reluctant to sort of celebrate that sort of thing when I see that I don't see that as progress. I don't think it's progress.
Interesting.
I think, if it yes, there's definitely an argument, and if it means that one of my omnivorous friends or family says, "Oh, I can eat a Kit Kat now," I see that's definitely if that helps them, then great. If they were going to buy a Kit Kat and they've now bought a vegan Kit Kat, and that leads them down a path that means that they have a conversation with me or you or somebody else, then it has a place. But as somebody within the vegan community who's been through what I've learned, I if I've got £1 to spend, I think it's a vote for something, and I'd rather spend that £1 with a smaller business that is thinking more holistically about all of their practices. But to your point, the fiver that I spend is ill-gotten in itself. It's quite literally got animal products in if it's a physical fiver. From that to where our tax money goes to, all of the companies that we use. I think it's to sort of talk of veganism in a binary kind of on-off fashion. And I know the definition doesn't, it supports the idea that it's as far as practicable and possible and so on, but I don't think it's useful to see it as a kind of perfect binary. But I would try and avoid it. But I still don't. I still struggle with it being progress. I don't know. I'm prepared to be swayed. You're smarter than me on this, but that's my.
I mean, it's really hard, isn't it? Because, we don't live in a perfect world. It is not black and white. It's like 5,000 shades of grey between black and white. And, we are overpopulating a resource limited planet with, still pretty monkey brained humans that have suddenly been given nuclear weapons and the power to do some awesome stuff. But we're still not that clever because we're still burning fossil fuels and killing animals. So nothing is pure, really, unless you go and live, in your eco bubble on a eco retreat with, growing everything yourself. But even something along the way has got some kind of blood on it. And I agree with you. If I've got money to spend, I'm not going to go to McDonald's and buy a veggie burger because of all the atrocities that McDonald's are doing. However, I'm glad that now there is an option and everyone's on their journey. So if you're a young kid that's surrounded, though young kids now, I think, are a lot more woke than we were when we were kids. But, if you're surrounded by people that are eating Kit Kats and burgers and pizzas, and if you can't even see a future where you won't be able to do that with your friends, a young brain is never going to go, it's an option, unless you're like somebody wonderful like a Greta Thunberg that was kind of born with a mission and a purpose. You're always going to go, I want, it's hard enough to fit in as a teenager and as a kid anyway, right? So then to go, I'm going to alienate myself from all these things. But maybe that kid that buys that Kit Kat or buys that McDonald's today, in their 30s, will then go, actually now I'm only going to buy ethical products. I'm only going to buy products that actually, have a sustainable past, a sustainable future. I'm only going to buy from natural, small producers. So even though I agree that it's one of those, it's not for us, there's still millions and billions of people who aren't vegan and are starting their journey. So if we can take £1 away from an animal-based product being bought, even if it's going into a business with a bigger picture, then it's a step for the good. And it's the same with investment. Do you want to take investment as a vegan business from a company that might have some kind of impact? It's the Body Shop being bought by L'Oreal. It's Oatly getting investment from Blackstone, which, actively deforests the Amazon to grow beef on, but they're taking that money because they know that investment is going to help them push the plant-based message and going to help them push the anti-animal testing message. So it's a very hard decision that people have to make. And I think in our really complex world, there's no soapbox that you can stand on to say I'm completely 100%, focused, but it's interesting.
No, it's definitely one for debate. I mean, the Oatly one, again, it's really challenging, that, isn't it? Do I give money to Oatly? Will they, will they do what they're proposing they're going to do with that money that they've had invested? Personally, it's made me not buy Oatly. I'll buy minor figures. Smaller business. I like what they stand for. I like the folks who run it. But if it means that Oatly can put up more billboards that say it's like milk but for humans in Piccadilly Circus, and maybe there's an argument for that. I suppose it'll only be borne out by what the result of it is, whether it pays off or not.
I mean, their message is strong. They did a double page spread in the newspaper at Christmas where it was a letter to the parent and a letter to the kid. And it was like, "Dear Dad, I know you're struggling. You don't know what to cook me anymore. I know it's really difficult, but please understand that, X amount of greenhouse gases go on animal infrastructure this year." And then there was a letter to the kid going, "Don't be hard on your dad. He's really struggling." And it was, their messaging is really helping to push a message that is basically like, it's fucking stupid to eat cow juice. It's for baby cows. What you doing? You're a human, you're not supposed to eat it. And they've got the balls to be able to do that. So I think sometimes for the greater good, you have to look at the macro picture. You have to look at the bigger picture. You have to look at the end goal. And necessarily how you get to that isn't always going to be perfect. But if we get to the end goal of eradicating animal agriculture, if we get to the end goal of, releasing all the billions of animals that are in slavery all around the world, then we're winning. And I think we have to have a little bit of, flexibility on our morals in terms of how we make more people go plant-based.
Agreed. It'd be good to get into craft beer. let's get
into beer.
Let's take a bit of a well, I suppose it's a left turn, but it's not really. It's all along the same path, really. So what's got you into craft beer and what's brought you here?
Yeah, so I have never been a huge drinker, but became a more mindful drinker definitely a few years ago. I was working for a vegan restaurant group called Redemption Bar. Don't know if you remember those guys? Yeah. So I was the operations director. We had 3 sites at the time, and obviously they're vegan, they're gluten-free. They're also alcohol-free, and they had a full, alcohol bar, not just like juices and smoothies. They had beer on draft, we had wines, cocktails, all that type of stuff. And I became a real mindful drinker and really got into drinking non-alcoholic beer. I actually love the taste of beer, but I never liked the alcohol version because it's a lot. I'm only little. There's a lot of pints for me to drink. I get very drunk and I get very bloated, and it's not fun. But I always love the flavour of beer and that hoppy, earthy texture. And so I became a real alcohol-free beer drinker. And at the same time, I've been working with mushrooms for about 6 or 7 years. Found medicinal mushrooms in a trip to California years ago and was just like, wow, I didn't even know that the kingdom of fungi had like this superhero subsegment of these mushrooms that are just, full of these bioactive compounds that really help support our immunity, can lower our blood sugar level, can support cognitive health. These adaptogens that are really key kind of in our toolbox of life to help us function at our best and keep us at our optimum. And so I've been supplementing with them for years, putting them into my coffee, putting them into my smoothies. And I wanted to do a product with them for a while. And, there's some really cool brands in the States like Four Sigmatic that are really mainstreaming mushrooms, making them cool, not woo-woo. Their slogan is like on shrooms. And they're really kind of breaking down those this mycophobia that we have in society, that mushrooms are weird, slimy things that grow in the dark. They either get you high or you put them on your pizza and there's nothing in between. So I really wanted to create a product that was going to kind of push mushrooms more into the mainstream and then use that as a vessel to kind of push fungi forward and get more involved with talking about, researching, finding out more how, fungi can help save the world. So this little thing called COVID, don't know if you heard of it.
Yeah, sadly.
It's a blip. Yeah, that happened last year. And, I had no work in hospitality. So I was sitting at home thinking, right, now's the time. So I started to put the two together. Functional mushrooms have a really interesting flavour profile. They're nutty, bitter, sweet, earthy, super similar to hops. And I just thought, oh my God, this is it. My 2 favourite things, let's put them together. I think most products and brands come from the founder's desire for something that they can't get. And I felt that we're creatures of ceremony, right? We're ceremonial, ritualistic. This has happened since we were dancing around campfires, back in the day. And in order to get anything into our lives, we need to make it habitual. We need to integrate it. That's where I think mushrooms and coffee work so well, because everyone or most people have that coffee or hot drink first thing in the morning. And for me, having the social aspect of coming together and sharing something, a drink, again, another marketing myth that it needs to be an alcoholic drink. But that social ceremony to me was another key ritual that I was like, yes, this is a great way for people to get another functional food into their diets. And at the same time, I wanted to prove that you could make a really great beer, 1 with mushrooms, 2 alcohol-free, gluten-free, and not use lactose or isinglass, which is, as you probably know, is fish guts, as a filtration for your beer. And just thought, why are people still brewing beer like that? So I started last year. We launched in November. Went to a few breweries where, it was like, who's this weird mushroom girl that wants to make this vegan beer? It's got mushrooms in it. It's gluten-free. And I was just like, yay, it's me. We launched last year.
Wow, that's incredible. So, you mentioned obviously you've got this idea. You've kind of figured out it's possible, and then you've gone to some breweries, etc. What was the process of like? I wouldn't even know where to begin thinking about how I'm going to make a beer, even if I had a great idea. Talk us through a little bit of what does that process look like?
Yeah, I was working within the mindful drinking space, and actually somebody contacted me to write some content for a magazine that they were launching, and they were an alcohol-free beer designer, creator, if you like. He was a master brewer, or he was the guy that I was working with was a master brewer, and he was basically developing alcohol-free beers, and he'd worked with, you know, some of the big brands, Big Drop and Infinite Sessions, and he'd create some really cool products. And I was like, oh, okay, this is great. So it was very serendipitous. As I was thinking about how am I going to make this beer, I somehow manifested this guy to contact me, and then we developed the liquid and we developed the recipe, and then I had to find a contract brewer that was going to brew it for me. Found a great brewery now up in the north of England, and you know, they make the product really well and kind of are on board with all my unique requests. I think a lot of beers now are vegan, which is great, because it's one of those things where it's like, let's take the low-hanging fruit of animal products off the shelf, shall we? It's like, you don't need to make a beer not vegan. It's like, all right, how am I going to get something that tastes like a steak for the omnivores? You know, we'll stick that over there and worry about it later. You don't need it in your beer. You don't need it in, you know, face products. You don't need it in juices or chips or anything else, flavorings. It's like, why are we still using animal derivatives in that? It's stupid. So, yeah, I wanted to, again, bring something to the mainstream that didn't have it in it. And I think that's an interesting way that we're going to push this forward as well. Is it's really down to consumers vote with their... They vote with their dollars and they vote with their forks. Like, something that you do every day is what you purchase. You know, when we live in a consumer society, so you're purchasing something probably every day and you're eating every day. And what you do on those two things can shape and change society. You know, where you're worried about the bigger picture and how I can change something, and, you know, what could I do to really change a whole global mindset. Well, actually, what you buy and what you eat can drive that change. And, you know, vote with your forks, and what you're putting into your bodies and what you're buying every single day can make a difference. So I just wanted to bring in another product that was going to push a plant-based message, and also then start to really help get fungi and mushrooms out into the mainstream as well.
What's just reversing it back into the marketplace, the sort of beer marketplace? What's the logic behind still using animal products? You mentioned it's pretty much irrelevant, like it's not just not required. What is the logic? Is it a cost thing? Is it just a tradition thing? Is it a flavor? What does it offer?
So flavor and body. So obviously you get this quite a lot in alcohol-free beers. You know, when you cap the fermentation or you remove the alcohol from it, you do strip out some of the body, and lactose is a great filler. You know, there's creamy stouts, creamy porters. There are, you know, beer brands that still brew with, they put lactose in it to pad it out, so it's a filler.
I see.
You can get that from other things. We get that from our mushrooms. You know, mushrooms are 90% polysaccharide, they're starch based, so as they condition in the beer, they're breaking down those starches and sugars and actually creating body to our beer. You can use things like maltodextrin. I'm not a big fan of that, but it is a way to kind of get some padding into your beer. And then, of course, isinglass was just one of those old stupid things. Like, we have microfiber filters now. We don't need to use fish guts or calf guts or cat guts or whatever that they used to use to filter stuff. Like, we've got, you know, microplastics now, unfortunately. Unfortunately, that means we don't have to use animals. So that was kind of just an old traditional method. And, it, you know, you still get it in wines a little bit as well in some of the older vineyards, but it's not sterile. It's not a great idea. And that's kind of harking back to the old school. But lactose is very much, I think, for body.
Is there any... this might sound like a silly question, but I'll ask anyway. I'm thinking the world of craft beer, my very limited, naive knowledge, is a place a bit like, I suppose, coffee and other alcoholic beverages, is a place where what's the word? The people who are kind of, if people are into it, they're really into it. Yeah. They kind of know their stuff. They're very particular. They're into the finite detail. And in that space is the kind of the average kind of not the average, but the kind of craft beer fan, the craft beer community. Are they receptive to a beer made of mushrooms, a beer with no alcohol, and a beer with no animal products, or has that been a really tough sell?
I mean, what's interesting with Fungtn is we sit in between like these four pillars of craft beer, no and low, functional foods, and then health and wellness around.
Yeah.
So we've just launched into Planet Organic last week. So we're sitting within that health space, but we're also in loads of little independent craft beer bottle shops. Now, your traditional, you know, bearded folk festival attending guy that likes to drink a cloudy beer, that looks like
Yeah.
someone's unhealthy urine sample
Yeah.
is probably never going to drink this weird woo-woo girl's mushroom beer that's vegan.
Jethro
It's just
Tull
not,
t-shirt is what I'm
yeah,
thinking.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just not on their radar. However, there are people within the craft beer world that love and appreciate craft beer and now just don't want the alcohol.
Yeah.
And first and foremost, I wanted to make a really great craft beer. So if you just want a great craft beer, you can drink it. And I've actually had people that have sampled it or bought it that didn't realize it had mushrooms in it until they got it home, and they were like, I thought Lion's Mane was just a cool name, Lion's Mane IPA. I was like, no, that's a mushroom. And they're like, huh, tastes all right. So
nice.
some people don't even realize that. But then if you are into functional mushrooms and into kind of adaptogenic herbs and fungi and health, then you'll see it and you'll be like, oh, that's quite cool. So even though it kind of narrows down the market, there is a crossover that you get in the middle of people that are wanting those things. And what's interesting is I've designed the business, and we're scaling the business in a way that we're going to reach out to global markets quite quickly. And I kind of quite quickly want to create a product that's drunk globally but brewed locally. So we're working with craft brewers in Canada, in the United States, in Australia, New Zealand, in Asia eventually, that will be brewing our beer on the ground. And within those sectors, there are these little pockets of customers that are looking for all of these things. And even though you won't be like the biggest craft beer brand in the UK, you're taking little segments in loads of different territories. And I feel like that's quite an exciting space to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, those sort of 4 pillars you talk about, it's pretty awesome fields to be, and like crossover, but also quite different in places as well. It's very cool. I like the bringing of those worlds together is very cool.
No one's sitting there right now. No one's doing that.
Certainly no one I've heard of it. Incredible.
Weird enough to brew a beer with mushrooms in it yet. So it's either the best idea ever or it's awful. We'll find out in a year.
I think it's probably the former. I'm sure it is a fantastic idea. So I know, very little, if not anything, about mushrooms. So the health benefits in this particular product of functional mushrooms, it'd be good to understand a little bit about that.
Yeah, mushrooms are amazing. They're a kingdom. They sit in between the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, and they're responsible for kind of joining the two together. They are in us, on us, all around us, fungi rather than mushrooms. And, they were responsible for dragging us out of the primordial soup and contributing to life as we know it. And there's pretty much no part of our life that fungi doesn't touch. Fungi is the organism, and mushrooms are the fruiting body of that organism. So think of mushrooms as like the apple on the tree, and the fungi is the tree. Mushrooms are nutritionally dense, whether that's your regular portobello mushrooms or your button mushrooms that you're used to having on your pizza or what have you, your porcini mushrooms you have in your risotto. They are nutritionally dense. They contain high levels of B vitamins, D vitamins, selenium, copper, manganese. They're a really great product. They're a great protein source, as we know. But we have this superfood category of mushrooms called the functional mushrooms or medicinal mushrooms that have been used by cultures for thousands of years. They grow all over the world, but namely in Northern Europe and Asia. And they've been used within cultures going back. The earliest records of mushroom use within cultures is, thousands and thousands of years. They've been kind of heralded for their health benefits. So reishi, which is a mushroom that we use in one of our beers, is hailed as the queen of immortality. And it was a revered mushroom that only the royals in China could have, and any, lowly peasants caught growing reishi or taking reishi were usually sentenced to death or locked up in a dark dungeon somewhere. And it really was this prized possession that the royal family kept to keep themselves healthy, and they believed in the powers of it. Now, your average consumer that, pops Nurofen and relies on the word of the big pharmaceutical company, thinks that plants and herbs are all a bit of woo-woo, and if they were great, we'd use them and we wouldn't have modern medicine. Well, we skip forward a bit. Modern medicine is amazing. There are amazing things that it can do and has achieved, of course, but the ancient medicine, the herbal medicine, the plant medicines that were being sustaining human evolution and growth and health for millennia are not to be ignored. And there's a reason why they were used for so long. And, yes, we can fix a broken leg, and if you get a cut, you won't die of septicemia anymore from infection. But equally, this reliance on pharmaceutical drugs is something that we now know isn't necessarily working for us. But what is amazing in science is these compounds that are in these mushrooms And the functional mushrooms, as I said, are very much like the superfood mushrooms. They're the superheroes that have additional compounds within them that, for some reason, they were revered for. Now, the ancient Chinese medicine doctors knew that that reishi was good for functioning of the liver, and knew that it was good for detoxifying. They knew that chaga would be taken. Chaga is a birch polypore that grows in northern forests in Scandinavia and northern Europe. And the ancient people knew that that was good to take around wintertime and time when you were cold or food scarcity, massively boost your immune system. The ancients knew that focus and being tired, you'd make up brews of lion's mane before you went on a trek or a pilgrimage or, into battle, because they somehow knew that it helped focus. But they didn't know why, but now science is matching up and saying we've isolated these compounds within these mushrooms that says it's the beta D-glucans within chaga that are massively immunosupporting, and it's the arenosines in lion's mane that help synthesize nerve growth factor, which nourishes our neurons and actually helps neural plasticity and cognitive health, and can help stave off things like dementia and Alzheimer's. So we're in a really interesting point where we can now back up and say this isn't just folklore or herbal medicine for those that kind of think that's all a bit woo-woo. We can now go, these compounds have been isolated, and we can prove that these mushrooms go above and beyond a normal product. We know that they're adaptogenic, and adaptogens basically help keep your body in homeostasis and keep you functioning at your best. We're all about this boosting our bodies, giving ourselves this boost, like somehow the body is the most perfect design ever. A fully functioning human body is a flawless design. We just fuck it up with everything we do to it. We don't fuel it properly. We put loads of toxins in it, on it, all around it. We don't rest it enough. And that makes our systems, like our immune systems, our endocrine, which is our hormone system, it makes them function not at their best. So adaptogens are like nature's little helper that helps kind of get these levels up to optimum functioning, which is brilliant functioning. So these functional mushrooms really are kind of heralded, and now the research and science is coming out to kind of prove it. So I really wanted to bring them back into the mainstream, I love it the way that modern humans think that they invented, they literally invented the wheel. Well, they did. But, just because someone in LA is doing yoga and drinking coconut water, everyone just thought that coconut water was a new thing. People have been drinking water out of coconut since, coconut trees evolved. So, and the same with mushrooms, but I want them to come back into the mainstream. I want people to discover them, because actually in our very hectic lifestyles that are full of external stresses and nasties, now more than ever, we need to look back to nature for natural solutions to help support us. We can't rely all the time on pharmaceutical companies. We can't rely on this pill-popping society where it's like, if I've got a headache, if I feel tired, I'm going to take something instant. We need to start going back to using food as thy medicine. It's the reason why Socrates, I think, said that, back in the day in Greece, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, because it is. The food will literally cure us and heal us. And there's nothing in nature that we can't utilize to help us keep us functioning at our best. And I think the rise of more functional foods and more herbs and eating more plants and just generally having this plant-focused attitude, that's how we're going to drive the world forward and survive, which is kind of important.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. How difficult is it to get hold of these mushrooms?
I have to go to like some dark little corner, and a little guy scurries out and drops them off on a unicorn. Pretty easy. They are cultivated all over the world. China are the biggest cultivators of them, because they've been using them within Chinese medicine and for culinary purposes a lot longer than anyone else. But there's also some amazing cultivators and producers in North America, and we use mushrooms from Scandinavia, from Finland, that grow in organic old growth forests up there, and it's a wonderful process. So actually pretty easy to get them now.
I just wonder, because it sounds so incredible. I'm sort of almost amazed that I haven't.
Secret.
Yeah, I haven't heard more of them. They're not in mainstream culture, and some massive pharmaceutical hasn't branded them as something they could sell in a pill.
Well, they do. They do. Statins come from mushrooms.
Okay.
Blood pressure medicine comes from mushrooms. Antibiotics, penicillin comes from a mushroom. There's so much fungi, I should say, rather than mushroom. There's so much fungi in modern medicine, and they have managed to isolate some of the compounds from it. But like everything, we're in this world where, we still can't really claim and say chaga in our beer helps support your immune system, even though there's a functional level of chaga in our beers. And if you have quite a few of them a week and you're, supplementing with other things, you are getting a functional benefit. And after a while, your immune system will probably fare better for having it than not having it. But because everything is patented and controlled by Big Pharma, you have to be super careful what you say. It's not an approved substance. For example, like vitamin C is now approved to say will support immunity, but mushrooms aren't. So my kind of purpose now is to be as many places as I can, talking about these mushrooms so people are educated around them, seeing the studies that have been done on them. And then, by association, people will start to see, okay, foods that contain them are going to give me a functional benefit, and hopefully get more people. Hopefully after listening to the show, people will Google functional mushrooms, reishi, chaga, lion's mane, and see the amazing places that you can buy supplements and integrate them into your diet, because they help me in a load of ways, and I can just sing their praises all day long.
You sound incredible,
as you can tell.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be one of those people Googling afterwards. That's amazing. The alcohol-free nature, you've covered it a couple of times in terms of like your personal preference and having a taste for beer, but not a particular love for the effects of alcohol and so on. Is that a growing trend that you're seeing? Is there when you were coming up with the product, was it very important to you that you thought, I know from a personal perspective it probably was, but was it also kind of like commercially? Did you see enough opportunity there? Is the low and no alcohol beer market growing?
Yeah, it's still a small market, but within the non-alcoholic category, the non-alcoholic beer category is the fastest growing one globally. There are a lot of countries who've been drinking non-alcoholic beer for a long time. The biggest markets are Spain and Germany, but there are huge swathes of the world that now want to start drinking products that have been off limits to them, whether that's because they don't drink alcohol for religious reasons,
right,
or countries like Asia where alcohol is just not the big thing like it is, in the West. And for me, I saw that there were more mindful consumers, but what happened, it was the chicken and the egg, really. I think people have wanted to be more mindful for a longer period of time. Think of all those times where you go, oh, I really don't want to drink tonight, but I'm going out for someone's birthday. I'm going to meet someone at the pub. And because there were no nice options for an adult soft drink, apart from, I'm not going to sit and drink pints of Coke all night and get a fairy mouth. I'm not going to drink, I was just used to drink pints of soda water and lime. It's very boring. It's very uninspiring. And because of this myth that's been interwoven into our society, you generally feel like you're missing out somehow because you're not drinking alcohol. And you miss out on, X, Y, and Z. And people then just defaulted and either didn't go out, felt miserable, or they just caved. Was now when you go out and you see, 3 or 4 non-alcoholic beers, maybe there's one on draft, maybe there's a really nice non-alcoholic spirit, so you can have a rum and coke, or you could have, a gin and tonic, but you're getting all those flavors without the alcohol. I think you're seeing people make more mindful decisions. That, as well as like with the plant-based movement, coupled with social media, I think we're just millennials, I think, elder millennials, we're on the cusp of it. But, is it Gen Z? People are in their 20s now. It's not the culture that it was when I was at university. You can go and get wasted and fall out of a club. Now you're so scared that there's going to be a picture of you puking in a bin around the back of a club that there's no way that you want to get wasted, because it's going to be on Instagram before you've even wiped the sick off your chin. So it's like people just aren't in that drinking culture anymore, which is great. Loads less mistakes will be made. People are very conscious of that. And I think, again, with that market, companies are looking at the consumers of the future, and they're not stupid. And, Heineken, Guinness, Molson, Budweiser, all these companies are spending tens of millions of pounds on non-alcoholic development. Gordon's have just released a non-alcoholic gin. They would not be investing in this as the future of their companies without it actually being a really viable segment. So I think I saw the future. I also selfishly saw a product that I wanted to have.
Yeah.
And I thought, I want to be conscious about something I'm putting out into the world. And drinking is fun, and sometimes it's not fun. And if you have an addiction, it's definitely not fun for you and your family and everyone involved. And I just thought, I want to put a product out to the world that's going to do some good. And even though if you've got an alcohol brand, that's great, not saying you're a bad person, everyone has a duty and their own personal responsibility to how they consume products and the things that they do. But I just thought, I want to put something out there that's actually doing something and helping push something forward. So, no sugar, no additives, no fillers, no animal products, no gluten. The gluten thing, I'm not gluten intolerant. I love a big bit of bread and a bowl of pasta. But I know if you are celiac or gluten intolerant, it's a nightmare and it's a really horrible experience. And even if you're not gluten intolerant, drinking lots of beers and the amount of gluten in it, that's what makes you feel bloated. And that's what makes your tummy feel a bit bubbly. So I just wanted to remove that out of it altogether. And it's easy to do naturally as well. So for me, it was very much kind of creating that future forward product. And also somebody asked me, would you think about doing a lower ABV or, a 4 or 5% beer with the mushrooms? And all the benefits that you get from adaptogens, they're helping your immune system, they're helping with your sleep patterns, they're helping with your hormone and endocrine system. Those are the things that alcohol diminishes. So really then you just have a product that was a double negative, right? So it just there wouldn't be any point. And I think the lessons and the things that the mushrooms have to teach us and the benefits of them, I think would be wasted when you're going to cancel all that out with alcohol.
Fair enough. I haven't drunk for 9 years, so I'm pretty excited about this.
Amazing, right? I'll get a box sent off to you.
I wasn't fishing for one, but I'm definitely your market.
Great.
I'm very excited to try. So on that note, where would folks go about finding out a bit more, perhaps learning a bit about mushrooms as well along the way, but importantly, finding out more about the beer and picking some up?
So we launched D2C, direct to customer, through a website because sadly there was no on trade, there were no restaurants and bars open when we launched. So you can go to www.fungtn.com and you can check out our beer shop there. There's also loads more information on the website about our products and about the mushrooms. And I've included links to scientific peer-reviewed papers as well, because it's important that when you're talking about the benefits of something, I don't want anyone to think it's a bit woo-woo or, it's just, I've got this information from somewhere. All the information I've got and everything I talk about is always from peer-reviewed scientific papers, published, that have come out with actual scientific studies on these benefits. So there's lots of links on there. You can also go to Planet Organic. We launched in London last week, which is cool. So you can go into any of those stores and pick some up. In fact, please do help drive my sales. And I've actually just started my own podcast, my own show called The M Word. We're doing a show each month. It's on I Am Sound on YouTube, and every month I'm talking to an entrepreneur, psychonaut, researcher, brand ambassador that's working with mushrooms and working to kind of make a more fungi forward future and talking about it. So lots of different places.
I love it. Well, thanks so much, Zoey. You've taught me an awful lot about mushrooms.
Oh, it's been amazing.
It's been great to chat to you. I'll put all the links to find out more on the show notes. But until next time, thank you so much.
Thanks. Great talking to you.